UAE's decision to leave OPEC is the main story there, as the global oil industry grapples with supply disruption caused by the war in Iran. Our team at Bloomberg Economics have chimed in on this. Very interesting take here that when you look beneath the hood, the clash between the two has actually been brewing. Not just this wasn't something that started just weeks ago. This was months and years in the making, and the Iran war has simply widened that fracture. Flip the page, please, and have a look at where we go in as far as oil markets go, and perhaps the potential impact on the oil markets and the take from Ziad and his team there is unlikely to react as far as oil goes. The issue isn't how much Gulf producers actually want to supply, is whether they can actually supply what they want to supply. And I think it's something we'll get into right now, Avril.
Yeah, with our colleague Steven Stapczynski, who leads our Asia energy coverage, and he joins me in the studio. So, Steven, I mean, we're getting these headlines, right, about how maybe this blockade will be extended even further. So maybe what we're seeing in Brent kind of makes sense because we're at levels we saw before the ceasefire began. Mm-hmm. But the UAE thing, longer term, what is that going to mean for the market balance as well?
You know, I think that's more of a, obviously not any near-term effect because they can't get the oil out, but more long-term, the importance of OPEC is in greater question. There have been other OPEC members that have left over the years. Smaller oil producer Qatar left a few years back, Angola. But the UAE is a pretty big blow. They're the third largest producer in OPEC, and they have, they're one of a few producers, basically just Saudi and them, that have the ability to spare capacity to potentially maybe increase their output, according to the IEA. Now, some analysts say that the UAE is already pumping at maximum capacity already, but the fact of the matter is, if they're losing these members, what importance does OPEC and OPEC Plus have on the wider market? How much ability do they have to actually sort of balance the market? And are there questions about other members leaving? We had a Bloomberg report just in the last 12 hours, kind of surveying a number of different officials within the OPEC group. So far, it doesn't look like we're going to see a mass exodus from OPEC Plus, but I think it does, sort of change the way that you look at the organization and how Saudi Arabia will effectively have influence in the market going forward.
Yeah, talk to us also about this rift that has been brewing for a while between the UAE and the Saudis in terms of the difference in visions or ambition.
It kind of goes back. It goes back to COVID in one way, but I would even say it goes back before then. But let's look at COVID for a minute. So in 2020, obviously, oil demand fell. We had famously oil prices in the U.S. going negative. Inventories were brimming. And one of the decisions by OPEC and the wider OPEC Plus organization was to cut back production. And that was led by Saudi Arabia. According to our reporting, the UAE and ADNOC, the main state-owned supplier out of the UAE, had wanted to actually increase, at least keep their production steady to continue to hold market share. But by doing so, by reducing their output, when oil prices rose again inevitably in 2021, you saw shale producers take more and more of the market, as well as other producers around the world. So this began the rift. I mean, there are other things beyond energy that are happening as well between the two countries. I think one thing that is quite fascinating, especially in this recent conflict with Iran, is that the UAE and officials from ADNOC have been very outspoken about Hormuz and about the situation. And while Aramco as well has talked about it, it just seems that the UAE is much more out there, kind of putting pressure on ending this, whereas Saudi Arabia, you haven't seen quite as many public comments coming out. That's one approach there as well. And then lastly, I think you also look at the economic power that both of the countries are trying to hold. The UAE has Dubai, a large economic hub for talent. Saudi Arabia is competing to do that as well and trying to create a similar sort of situation in Riyadh. Is that part of that tension within the region as well? Something interesting to look at.
So